Welcome back to another edition of Plus Money Picks. This will be for UFC 263, Adesanya versus Vettori 2. Mainly looking forward to the Davison Figueredo and Brandon Moreno match in this card, and then I'm intrigued to see how a 5-round fight will go between Leon Edwards and Nate Diaz. Outside of that, I am looking forward to the prelim headliner between Drew Dober and Brad Riddell. The rematch between Eric Anders and Darren Stewart should be interesting given that it'll now be at light heavyweight. And then, of course, got to be looking forward to another Movsar Ivloev fight, as I think he's a fighter that'll just keep evolving within the UFC. Alright, so let's get into the first fight. The first fight of UFC 263 will be between Carlos Felipe and Jake Collier. Carlos Felipe 10-1, Jake Collier 12-5. Currently, Carlos Felipe is sitting at, I believe, let's see where he's at. Carlos Felipe is currently minus 170, and Jake Collier is plus 145 on Bet Online. As far as how they match up, it's actually going to be Collier that has the height advantage. He'll be coming in at 6'3", Carlos Felipe at 6 foot. And Collier will also have a few inches in reach advantage. I think in this fight, Carlos Felipe is probably going to be the quicker fighter. Yeah, he's probably going to have a little bit more success with his jab. He's just going to be probably a little bit higher volume as well. I'm not expecting him to knock out Jake Collier or anything. Carlos Felipe does have knockouts on his record, but they're against relatively low-level guys. I think a lot of the hype around Jake Collier is going to come off of his last win. But people have to remember that that win was over John Vellante, which I think is one of the lowest level UFC fighters out there, especially at heavyweight. I don't think he has any business at heavyweight. So he just looked good because Vellante wasn't really defending himself that well, and Vellante is not very quick. He's also not the biggest heavyweight. Because outside of that, if you look at how Collier matched up with Aspinall, which there's no shame in it, but he was knocked out pretty easily and quickly by Aspinall. He'll have the reach advantage in this fight, and he does throw hard, but I don't see him finishing Felipe. I don't see him following up enough, even if he does crack him. So with that being said, I think this fight goes to decision. And I think just from volume and speed alone, Felipe should be able to edge it out. I also think that he'll be there more in round 3. So my official pick will be Carlos Felipe. The next fight is going to be between Farsium and Luigi Benjamini. This one, I think the odds are pretty correct, especially just because we haven't seen these guys against too much UFC competition, and they match up pretty well. So it's close odds still. Farsium is minus 135. Luigi Benjamini coming in at plus 115. As far as how they match up with each other, it's going to be Farsium with the height advantage. He'll be 6'1", whereas Luigi Benjamini is 5'8". But there's only going to be a 2-inch reach advantage, at least according to Tapology, for Farsium. Both these guys, very young fighters, so they do have a lot of room to improve and could look a lot different compared to their last fight. They both kind of have records, just like most up-and-comers, where they didn't really fight a whole lot of tough competition before they came to the UFC, so they still have pretty solid records. Benjamini, he will most likely have the strength and power advantage in this fight. Well, he definitely will have the strength and power advantage in this fight. He has a 100% finish rate, and he's only gone to the third round once. But if you're looking at Zium, so I expected to go with Benjamini when I was initially looking at this fight, but then looking at Zium, he's a sharp striker. He knows how to use his long limbs. So I do like the striking from him. He doesn't depend on power quite as much. He'll defend a lot better. Uh, People do try to wrestle him all the time, and he does get taken down, but he has decent grappling and especially defensive wrestling. He knows how to use his height as a weapon to kind of bend his way out of takedowns. And the ultimate thing that made me side with Farsium is that I know that he could go into at least 3-round fights and still be fighting at the end. Whereas I don't have as much confidence in Benjamini with that, especially because he is someone that relies on being explosive. So in a closely lined fight between these guys, I'm going to side with Farsium. But I do think that it could go either way. But I do not hate a play on Farsium by decision. Someone that can take shots, so I'm sure he'll be able to handle anything that Chase Hooper throws at him. So I don't expect Hooper to do much on the feet. Steven Peterson will most likely just keep moving forward, pressuring Hooper. And basically, I think Steven Peterson should win as long as he's able to keep it on the feet. It's the same tale as any Chase Hooper fight. So as far as where you're going to put safer money, I would say bet with Steven Peterson. But just like any Hooper fight, you can't always feel good about it because a submission could come out of anywhere. So I wouldn't say it's the best fight to bet on, but the bet will be Steven Peterson. I could see it going to decision, but I could also see a late KO by Steven Peterson in this one. So as I started recording this, I saw that it looks like Frank Camacho will be out of the matchup with Matt Fravola. Sounds like he was in a car accident, so hope Camacho is okay. I was already on Matt Fravola in this fight. I don't see any odds yet. Oh yeah, so actually they do have odds out on this. Matt Fravola is now a minus 265 favorite, with Terrence McKinney coming in at plus 225, which I think is fair based off of I haven't really been able to tape study Terrence McKinney too much, but I do remember seeing his Contender Series fight against Woodson, where he did get some pretty solid takedowns and was able to hold down Woodson for a while. But then once Woodson came back with the flying knee, that was it. So don't necessarily think too much about Terrence McKinney based on what I know. So as far as any advantages, he'll be 5'10", 74-inch reach compared to Fravola's 5'9" and 71-inch reach. So I guess he'll have a reach advantage in this one. The only thing is, I know that Terrence McKinney is someone that relies on his grappling, and I think Matt Fravola is a pretty solid grappler. And looking at McKinney's record, he seems like someone that's really dependent on finishes. So I think someone like Fravola that could drag this to a decision and make it painful for Terrence McKinney isn't the best for him, especially now that he's taking this on short notice. I do think that Matt Fravola is a pretty decent UFC fighter. I don't necessarily think that he's going to be a top 5 guy or anything, but I don't think it's the best person for Terrence McKinney to be jumping into a fight with short notice. So as of right now, without really being able to look too much into Terrence McKinney, I would say that I'm feeling the pick is Matt Fravola by decision. Next fight on the card is Alexis Davis versus Penny Kianzad. Kianzad currently a minus 191 favorite. Alexis Davis coming back at plus 166. They match up with Penny Kianzad having a height of 5'7" and a reach of 66 inches, whereas Alexis Davis is 5'6" with a 68-inch reach. I think in this one, so Kianzad's going to have the advantage with her boxing. She does also have a pretty decent clinch game and can put in good work on the cage. She gets hit sometimes in fights, but she does keep her hands high, so I do like that defensively for her. She lands 5.14 significant strikes per minute while just absorbing 3.62. The only thing that I worry about in this fight is, although her takedown defense percentage looks high on paper, I do think that Alexis Davis is good enough to get some takedowns in this fight. Alexis Davis, while I think she'll struggle boxing, she could come back by throwing leg kicks. Her takedown game is pretty solid. I think she kind of went off on Sabina Mazo, but that was mostly just because Sabina Mazo is low level. So Davis normally just gets about a takedown a fight, but she's position over submission, I would say, so she's pretty good about holding people down. The only thing is, if this stays on the feet, I do think Davis is going to wear damage worse than Kanzad. She's one of those veterans that has a lot of scar tissue, so I think she'll get bloodied up, especially because she's a little bit slower on the feet. So I think Kanzad should be able to pepper her up with a jab. So if this fight really does end up playing out close and Kanzad isn't giving up too many takedowns or allowing Davis to hold her down for extended periods of time, I see Kanzad edging it out by decision. And yeah, that's where I feel comfortable betting this fight. I don't necessarily think that Kanzad's the best parlay player or anything, but you can get plus money on her by decision. Next fight is between Movsar Evloev and Hakeem Dawud. Evloev is coming in at minus 230, Dawud at plus 195. Dawud is going to be 5'8" with a 72-inch reach, and Evloev is 5'7" with a 72.5-inch reach. Evloev is a very solid grappler. He's gotten multiple takedowns in all of his UFC fights besides when he fought Mike Grundy, and he's gotten 4+ takedowns when he's fought UFC strikers. He's pretty good at going straight into advantageous positions when he gets his takedowns. A lot of times he can end up right on someone's back. He's undefeated for a reason and has never been finished, of course. And what I like when you're looking at his record, one fight that stood out was that he handled Sungwoo Choi. And Sungwoo Choi, I think, is a pretty solid striker, and I think someone that is a lot stronger than Hakeem Dawud. Hakeem Dawud, he has good cardio. He is a very quick striker, but he's just not very powerful to go along with that. He is hard on leg kicks and will be throwing mostly kicks. His jab, he kind of just throws out there. He doesn't really always try to apply it too hard to people. He has gotten taken down in his fights, but he does also have an 85% takedown defense. Some of that comes from fights where people try to take him down a lot. Bokniak was 2 out of 12, and Tuhugov, it says that he was 1 out of 7, but when you're watching that fight, I don't think all of those 7 attempts were necessarily full takedown attempts. Looking through Dawud's record, he is on a win streak, but he has 3 split decision wins. So his fights do tend to stay close. So I don't necessarily see him running away with this, even if he is ahead. He's most likely just going to be slightly ahead. So I think either way that this fight goes, I have a very strong lean towards Evloev, and he's someone that I feel comfortable betting in this card. I don't think he'll finish Dawud, but look to see Evloev win this fight by decision. Next up, we have Joanne Calderwood and Lauren Murphy. Joanne Calderwood is currently minus 145, Lauren Murphy plus 125. As far as how they match up, Lauren Murphy 5'5" with a 68-inch reach, and Calderwood is 5'6" with a 65.5-inch reach. This one, it's tough. I thought I was gonna feel into the idea of betting Lauren Murphy, just because I feel like I'm ready to start fading Calderwood. But then watching her fight, I just don't like her striking very much. She does, as far as significant strikes landed per minute, it's 3.8 versus 3.82 strikes absorbed per minute. So not great striking defense. I was hoping to see a better takedown game for me to feel confident with Murphy beating Calderwood. She hasn't got more than 2 takedowns in a fight, and I feel like you got to be a decent sub threat or just a really amazing striker to beat Calderwood. And Lauren Murphy only really has 1 submission win on her record, so don't necessarily feel too confident there. And then on top of that, she has pretty bad scar tissue, so I think even if Calderwood has just a solid first round, Lauren Murphy's probably going to be bleeding a lot. Calderwood, she's very high output. She's up over 6 significant strikes landed per minute. She will definitely have higher volume in this fight, and she'll have the more diverse striking. But it's really just the grappling, and then, I mean, both of them are older fighters at this point. I just don't think I'm going to really make a bet on this one. But my lean will be Calderwood, most likely by decision, but she could really run away with the volume and get a later finish. The next fight is one that we've had the benefit of already seeing once. It's going to be between Eric Anders and Darren Stewart. Eric Anders has been sitting at minus 150, whereas Darren Stewart is coming back at plus 130. They're about the same height and reach wise. As far as what's going to be different from the last fight is they're going to be fighting at 205. I thought it was pretty evident that Eric Anders already had a strength advantage in the first fight, which I think could be amplified in his next one with it being at 205. He does have a questionable fight IQ at this point. When you're looking at what went down in that last fight, he kind of could have just coasted into that finish. It looked like Darren Stewart was just going to go out, and then he just decides to throw a knee. Darren Stewart, he was winning the striking exchanges in the beginning, but once the grappling started and once Eric Anders started doing what he normally does, where he kind of just wants to push you up against the cage and make it more grappling, Darren Stewart's energy just plummeted. And that really just speaks to, so the main way to beat Eric Anders is to be an in and out kind of striker or just to really have good movement. Khalil Roundtree did it really well against him. He dug in leg kicks and kind of just bounced in and out, and Eric Anders didn't really have much of an answer for that. But Darren Stewart, he's not a finisher really himself. All of his knockouts were against lower level competition, and even if he's kind of in a fight where he's moving around a lot, by the time that he's actually throwing strikes, he really just likes to sit into all of his punches and just trade in the pocket. So I don't see him having a style, or at least switching up his style enough to be able to handle Eric Anders in this next one. He's just shown that one of his weaknesses is grappling. So I feel decently confident taking Eric Anders, possibly even just by decision in this upcoming card. But I don't think I'll get too specific with that, just because of where the line's at right now. And my pick will just be straight Eric Anders. This next fight is one that I think will be good. It's between Brad Riddell and Drew Dober. As far as odds go, Brad Riddell currently plus 117, Drew Dober minus 137. As far as how they match up, so Drew Dober, 5'8", 70-inch reach, and Brad Riddell will actually have the reach advantage. He's 5'7" with the 71-inch reach. Looking at this from the outside at first, I thought I was just going to jump on the Dober side, but then doing the tape study, I gradually shifted towards choosing Brad Riddell. Brad Riddell, never been knocked out, has pretty solid cardio. He's usually still going and even looks better sometimes in the third round. He has decent volume. He's over 4 significant strikes landed per minute versus around 2.5 strikes absorbed per minute in the UFC, which, I mean, he has been facing primary grapplers, I guess. But even with that, and even just having a kickboxing base, he's still gotten at least one takedown in all of his UFC fights. He ends up getting comfortable in grappling exchanges and then kind of using it against these grapplers that have just been going at it with thinking that that's their one advantage. So he hasn't really faced a primary striker yet, and some people might say like, oh, he hasn't faced UFC strikers, but I actually think that makes me feel more comfortable in choosing him because I think that's just where he's going to feel most comfortable. So I think it'll allow him to kind of go off. Drew Dober, he will have the power advantage in this fight, I guess. And he is pretty similar with how many significant strikes he lands per minute. But then he's someone that absorbs a bit more strikes. He's kind of okay with getting hit just to get close to people. He might force the clinch and kind of pressure Brad Riddell against the cage. It seems like that's more a part of Drew Dober's game than it is Riddell's. And Dober's going to look maybe a little bit quicker just because he's more into kind of bouncing back and forth, whereas Brad Riddell kind of just likes to stalk his opponents a little bit more and keep his hands high. But just with where the odds are at and everything and looking at the talent of both of these guys, I'd say the side to be on is Brad Riddell. And I think there's actually, just looking at his record so far, there's a chance that he's the one shooting takedowns where I expected looking into this before that might be Dober's route. So yeah, didn't expect to be here at this point in the week, but I'm going to be taking Brad Riddell, and I think the move is to take him by decision because I don't see him knocking out Drew Dober, and that's a pretty good plus money play. So once again, my pick for this one, Brad Riddell. Next fight, we have Jamal Hill, minus 285 against Paul Craig, plus 245. And looking at the matchup between these guys, both these, I mean, they're big dudes. They're, it is to be expected at 205. Paul Craig, 6'3", 76-inch reach, and Jamal Hill, 6'4", with a 79-inch reach. I think everyone knows what's up with this fight. Jamal Hill definitely got the striking advantage in this one and will definitely have a lot more power on his feet. In his last fight, he handled Ovince St. Preux pretty well. I think he'll come at Paul Craig trying to tag him with body kicks. Jamal Hill doesn't always defend his head very well, but I don't think that's as much of an issue in this fight. The main thing that I'd be worried about with Paul Craig is obviously just that Paul Craig gets Jamal Hill down to the ground. So I think Jamal Hill, he just has to stay away from the clinch. He has to stay away from getting stuck against the fence, and then of course defend takedowns. Paul Craig definitely would need to grapple on this. And I'm not really convinced that he'll be able to take Hill down. A lot of his takedowns tend to be reachy and desperate, but you never know. I don't even really need to get the best takedown. It might just come down to if he could grab on to Jamal Hill. So it's definitely a risky fight, and I don't necessarily, I think it's pretty sketchy to just be taking Jamal Hill with where the number line is at. But there's a really solid chance that he knocks out Paul Craig at some point in this fight, possibly even before Paul Craig could really even think about grappling. So I think, if anything, take the play at Jamal Hill by knockout because that's his most likely path to victory. and you'll get a little bit better odds on that. Next fight, we have Belal Muhammad versus Maia. This one, Belal Muhammad's going to be minus 230, Maia plus 195. As far as how they match up, Maia 6'1", 72-inch reach, and Belal Muhammad 5'11", 71-inch reach. So everyone knows Maia's game. He's all about grappling. But because of that, he does have very rudimentary striking. He tends to be out-volumed on the feet because he's not even really thinking about setting up strikes. And then his takedowns, somewhat predictable and telegraphed at this point. Now that he's 43, I don't really see any reason to be betting on him. But I guess if you were chasing the sub prop, that would be the way to go. I don't think Muhammad's really the guy to be giving up submissions to someone so predictable at this point, but you never know. He'll be trying to use his boxing against Maia in this one. Belal Muhammad will probably just be trying to volume strike Maia. He usually likes to mix in takedowns, but that shouldn't be in his game plan this time. As far as his history with being finished, he's never been subbed, and his only KO loss is to Luque. So I don't necessarily see too much risk of Belal Muhammad getting finished in this one, but I also don't see Belal Muhammad finishing Maia at all, just because Belal Muhammad's not really much of a knockout guy. And I think even if he popped Maia could kind of just lay on the ground and try to bait Muhammad in. So even if he was popping him, I kind of think it would just be Maia getting stood back up a lot. So I think the move in this fight would be to just take Belal Muhammad by decision. But it is sketchy anytime that you're betting against Maia just because of his strength and his subs. But yeah, if you're going to take Belal Muhammad, I wouldn't say there's a whole lot of value in taking him at minus 230, but maybe chase the Belal Muhammad by decision prop. All right, and next we have kind of a weird one just because it's 5 rounds. I haven't really looked into why it's 5 rounds, but this one's going to be between Leon Edwards and Nate Diaz. Currently, Leon Edwards is minus 600 and Nate Diaz is plus 400. I think those odds are kind of off. I mean, Leon Edwards, he should be a pretty big favorite in this just because of how he's been looking recently and just that he's the younger fighter that has taken a lot less damage at this point. If you're looking at how they're matching up, Leon Edwards, he'll be taller, but he'll have 2 inches less in reach. He has a 74-inch reach, while Nate Diaz has a 76-inch reach. So as far as how it's going to play out, I think possibly Nate Diaz will have a little bit of just a straight boxing advantage. He might be throwing more hands in this fight, but Leon Edwards will be the more well-rounded striker, and he'll probably have a strength advantage in the clinch. I wouldn't be surprised to see him work in a decent amount of takedowns in this one, especially if it is 5 rounds. He could kind of just work out some control time. I'm not really too worried about Nate Diaz subbing him. The risk of a finish, I think, is mostly if history repeats itself and Edwards cuts up Nate Diaz and just makes it look really bloody and kind of tempts the ref to just step in. But I really do see this going to decision. I don't really see Nate Diaz edging out a decision in this one. So I think the side would be to take Leon Edwards by decision. Next fight we have is the rematch between Figueredo and Brandon Moreno. Currently, Figueredo is minus 220. Moreno is plus 185. Figueredo 5'5", 68-inch reach, and Brandon Moreno is 5'7" with a 70-inch reach. In their first fight, I decided to just rewatch that as my tape study because I mean, it's the best key into this matchup. Moreno, he had a good use of the jab in that fight and a lot of good body shots. His takedown game in that fight was solid, but the only thing was he never really did anything with that takedown, which I guess that would be the adjustment that they'd have in this one, is figuring out how to work in ground and pound. But Figueredo is just a hard guy to take down. He's someone that had a strength and power advantage in that fight, and I think if his health is on point this time, he'll just have an even bigger strength and power advantage. He landed some huge shots in that first round, and when you're watching it again, he really looks like he is conserving himself. He didn't really go for it in that fight, and there were some rounds that he seemed to kind of take off. He seemed like he was assuming that either way he was kind of just going to get Moreno out of there, but that just never happened because Moreno is really durable. Even with Figueredo not apparently being on it with his health, he still outlanded Moreno in that last fight. So yeah, the way I see it, if he really just does come in healthier, more prepared for this fight, and now that he's seen Moreno, I think the rematch aspect really benefits Figueredo more. So I see no reason why Figueredo shouldn't win this fight, and so I'll take Figueredo in this one. I wouldn't be surprised if it goes to decision again, just because Moreno is really durable. But I think Figueredo by knockout is live, even though Moreno hasn't been knocked out before. And that brings us to the main event, which is, of course, Israel Adesanya versus Marvin Vettori 2. Currently, Adesanya is a minus 264 favorite, and Vettori is plus 224. As far as how they match up, of course, Adesanya has a reach advantage. He has a 6-inch reach advantage. He has an 80-inch reach and is 6'4", whereas Vettori is 6 foot with a 74-inch reach. I was kind of thinking just from being around the sport enough to know that Vettori, is a grappler, and then everyone brings up the whole split decision thing. I was thinking that I was going to want to do a plus money play on Vettori, but honestly, looking back at that split decision, I don't understand how it was a split decision. It seemed pretty clear cut that Adesanya won that first fight, and Vettori really was only able to get a takedown in that last round. The only thing is, he was able to hold him down a bit, and I guess that's what people have been making a big deal about, is that Jan Blachowicz was able to do that to Adesanya recently, but the truth is, Vettori is not Jan Blachowicz, and a lot of that, I think, did have to do with the fact that Jan Blachowicz was just a much bigger guy. Because Adesanya, I mean, when it comes down to it, 82% takedown defense, and he's just one of the best strikers in the game. And in that first fight, he was really effective with leg kicks. I think that could be a factor again. And honestly, it was domination, Vettori versus Holland, but I didn't really like what I saw in that fight, because I thought that Vettori didn't really look that good against Holland on the feet. Holland actually landed a lot of decent shots, and as far as reach wise, he's pretty similar to Adesanya. So I think Adesanya, being levels above striking wise, should be able to capitalize on that, and it's just not going to look the same as Vettori versus Holland, because Holland has a 47% takedown defense, whereas, like I had said, Adesanya has an 82% takedown defense. And I just don't think that Vettori has quite the quick and explosive takedowns to just consistently get Adesanya down. And on top of that, when you're watching the Holland fight, Vettori, he's staying in it. His cardio is good, but by the end of that fight, he is breathing really hard. He's still able to shoot and everything, but I think Adesanya is only going to make him work harder. So far, I haven't really seen anything to make me think that Vettori is going to be the first 185er to beat Adesanya. I don't feel wildly confident in Adesanya on this one, especially with how his last fight went. But given his history, I don't necessarily think that I want to pick against Adesanya in this one. So my pick will be Adesanya. Vettori, I don't believe he's been knocked out before, which isn't surprising when you see his neck. But yeah, so I could see Adesanya edging out a decision in this one, but I don't expect Adesanya to win every round. But I think the way that I'm going to go about this one is to pick Adesanya by decision. So those are all of my picks and predictions for UFC 263. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. I hope everyone does great with their bets and that everyone has a profitable weekend. And good luck to everyone out there.